Welcome, everybody, to the One Fun Guy podcast. Tonight, my guest is going to be Roberta, the Tool Lady. She's been on before, so some of you guys will recognize her. But I was just a guest on her podcast, and I said, hey, would you mind doing mine again? I really wanted to ask you some interesting questions. She's like, really? I'm like, yeah. So, Roberta, welcome. Introduce yourself real quick for those of you who haven't seen you before and tell us a
Well,
little about yourself.
hey, family. I'm Roberta the Tool Lady. I have two podcasts that are live, uh, basically twice a month. So that's 4 times live. I'm going to be live more on different medias, but I'm working on it. But anyway, my two podcasts is Put It All on Red. The other one is Taboo Chronicles, and they're just what they are, what they say. You know, the Put It All on Red is really a bet. It's a bet on life, the best, or living your
Mm-hmm.
best life, right? The next one is Taboo Chronicles, where we talk about things that are a little bit more uncomfortable. Also, a little bit more of what's going on socially, and things that we don't like to talk about that we usually whisper about or keep
Mm-hmm.
secret. So that's a little bit about me.
Sure. So, what I wanted to talk about tonight is a little bit of a interesting subject because podcasters, when they go on with each other, they usually talk about like social influences and what's going on and all that stuff. But I kind of wanted to get your roots, like what made you want to podcast, how you started, what got you into it, who were your influences when you started, who did you want to be like, and then walk us through your first couple episodes, working out the kinks, all the mistakes you made and learning from them. Like, give us your background in that, because obviously you're a lot more seasoned than I am. But like, I always love getting different perspectives of people who podcast because those of us who don't do it really don't understand the work that goes into it between promoting it and then getting it out there and then having people follow you. It's a process. It's almost like another job per se, even though we have fun doing it and we enjoy it. But I think new podcasters don't really understand the work that it takes. I think they just think they start a podcast, people are going to follow them, they get
Right.
10,000 followers like nothing, and then they go from there. Yes, that happens to people who have an influence already, right? So if you're in the music
Right.
world or you're in the movie world and you kind of have that fan base,
Right.
well, then it's easy to start. But those of us who don't, that are working from the bottom up, I just wanted to get your take on it, how you started and what made you want to do it, and then the steps you took from there. So, floor is all yours.
Okay. Well, I'm a little bit funny because the thing about me, I don't do a lot of studying. I do like to study, like I do read a lot of different books, but usually they're like the art of war and stuff like that.
Mm,
So it's not really necessary like how to do this, how to do that. Which I so basically I started off in the social service field. I'm a therapist by trade. Been doing it for so long. I'll say that much. So basically, like I was thinking, times are changing, right? Things are transcending. We're not just like where I see you, you're my neighbor, or I go to the community center, or I go, I serve my community anymore. We're global now. So the next thing with being global is like, okay, well, how do I fit into this global world? Right? Because it's intimidating. So that was my guess, my thought on podcasting because it's a new deal, but it was just kind of taking off um, at the time that I first started. So I've
mm-hmm,
been in it 2 years, and podcasting has gotten more and more advanced. Like not advanced, but it's got more traction. I'll say it that
mm-hmm.
way
Sure.
because now you can get a podcast on everything. How to potter, be a potterer, how to build a house, finances. You just have a podcast. You have so many. You have magic
Right.
podcasts. You just have so many different podcasts. Um, so now it's just such a variety. But when I started, really, it was just to figure out there's this global deal that's starting. It's called podcasting. There's not a lot of people in it, but there's people who have already shown interest in it.
Hmm.
And we are in a place where we're going, it's international. And if you don't change with it, with what's going on, you're going to kind of be left behind, right? So that's kind of where I was at. Okay, well,
Hmm.
and we're coming out of COVID, remember? So COVID was our first reminder. Well, man, you need to know how to get on technology. You have to learn how to do Zoom. You're going to have to learn how to do all these things because you can't see your clients anymore or just depend on them coming into an office. So this all those thoughts in my head, like, man,
Hmm.
what am I going to do? And it just happened to be my co-host Jackie. She came to where I was working at, and we talked about wholeness because that's our field. We're in social services, and so she came. Excuse me, I've been having a cough. I'm sorry.
No worries. Take your time.
Well, anyway, she came and she talked about this, and she talked about well, she came and did a presentation, and once she was done, I approached her. First, we began to talk, and what we talked about was coming out of COVID, and basically, I'm gonna pause this for a minute. Well,
Yeah,
let me
take your
see.
time.
I'm so sorry. I've
No
had a
worries.
cold for like
Hey, it
well
happens. I'm
since
just getting
last
over
week,
a
so it ain't
sinus
been
infection,
that
so
long. I'm
I
being
know.
dramatic. I I'm being dramatic.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
But
We're
anyway,
all under the weather.
so so after right, because we're changed, the weather's changing here. But anyway, she approached me and she was like, "Well, we started talking. We just started just talking. And if you ever talk to me, you know I'm a talker." And so we just began to talk, and I was like, people they need to know about this. They need to know how to take care of themselves. They need to know about all the ways that you need to take
Hmm.
care of yourself. And we need to just have more of a dialogue about this. And coming out of COVID, how everybody's traumatized, and we've all had a traumatic experience. So it's just not the kid that was raised in a single family anymore, or or you had it were in an accident. Now it's more like everybody. We have this one traumatic experience. And so how are we gonna talk about this? How are we gonna filter this out and take it to our communities? And so I told her, I said, well, I know about there's this podcast stuff. What do you think about it? And she goes, you know what? I got this lady who's been, approaching me about
Hmm.
it. And I'm thinking about it. And I was like, well, let's do it. So basically we just started meeting like every week. We would meet on Tuesday and we just have like a conference call because it started off for social service people,
Hmm.
providers. So we would have a conference call and we just talk about launching a podcast,
Right.
and then finally we did. But some of the things that you brought up were the bumps in the road we came up as against.
Hmm.
Because again, it was four of us starting, and now there's only two. And that's on that Taboo Chronicles. And we had to change the name of the show. It was Put It All on the Table. And now we call it Taboo Chronicles.
Right.
But what happened was, you're right. Once people start, you don't think about like what you really don't. Even after we had met, because we met probably about 2 months before we launched. We met, we talked about what we were going to decide. We had a photo shoot. We did the whole deal, but we didn't realize that it takes this is a lot of work. So basically you're giving up an hour, if not more, a
Hmm.
week. And then you're coming up with your topics. Then because we're all degreed in we were all degreed within that in our area, we wanted individuals who were going to come on to be just as knowledgeable as
Mhm.
us. So we had a bar set for the people that came on. We didn't want, of course we can go online and we can find,
Sure.
coach such and such, but coach such and such may have never had formal education
Mhm.
like the way we did. So we came into all of those battles like that. And not only that, just our own family and trying to make that balance,
Right.
right? Because that's how this got started, was a topic about balancing your life and how do you balance your life and then deal with past trauma, the past trauma of COVID. So that's how this topic got started with my co-host to even
Mhm.
start a podcast. And here we are in a podcast, and we put basically we put one more thing on our plate
Right.
once we begin to see that this is a pretty hands-on task. This
Mhm.
requires balancing act. It requires a balancing act of your family engagement, uh the whole deal. This is a obligation that requires your full attention, even if it's just once a
Right.
week, even if it's once every 2 weeks. Because guess what? You want to market. You want your topics to be genuine. You want it to get over. You want to get to your public. You want to get whatever you're trying to convey. You want to get the
Mhm.
best.
Sure.
And I think as a podcaster, that's those were some of the things we were challenged. And of course, like I said, we started off fourth or two because of that, because it is more time excuse me, than we thought. We just didn't figure out, oh, we're gonna have to, and like you said, one fun guy, how we gonna get these people to watch us,
That's it.
right? And then say something happens, because three of us were parents and one of us was not. And not saying she didn't have any obligations, because she did. She had a
Right.
one of our co-host had a major obligation. So that all came into play too, because she's like, I can't go on, we had some sickness. We just we had a whole lot going on. It ended up like really a lot. So it
Yeah.
is. It requires, like I said, it requires so much hands-on. Um, so I'm hoping
Mhm.
that's your answer. The other part is I used to watch I know and he's an Asian podcaster, and he does finances
Okay.
on YouTube. And so that was kind of like the guy that I really liked, and always follow. Now since then, and since now that I podcast, I watch a lot more.
Sure.
Like, I watch a lot more of just a variety now.
Right.
Actually, um, I've gotten the way I'm unsubjectively. I may just turn on iHeart and just go down the podcast list and just start listening,
Yeah.
because basically I'm trying to figure out how I can get better. Where am I standing at? And then try to pick up some tips, on along the way. I say it
Sure.
that way.
Yeah. So I because what I've been a part of, I did a podcast with Danny a few months ago, and we kind of talked. She asked me like what equipment did I start with and what did I use? And I was like, I started off with my old
Mhm.
Samsung phone that I wasn't using anymore. And that's what I did my first probably 14 podcast on. And then I upgraded to an iPad. I went to what I have
Mhm.
currently now set up. I had a few lights that I borrowed from Crystal to put in, and I asked
Mhm.
her if I could borrow her old iPad
Mhm.
because mine was kind of real. It was an old one. So she said, "Yeah, go ahead." So I kind of wiped it clean and I started from scratch, and I've been using that now. but my
Mm-hmm.
setup is relatively inexpensive for anybody who's podcasting. My whole setup cost me less than $300. So I didn't I didn't, want to portray the message that you need this elaborate studio to set up, because those guys down the road, they didn't start with that, right? They started off very raw. And so
Mm-hmm.
like all my stuff has changed now. So like my background's changed, my whole area's changed, and now I'm getting more comfortable, but I didn't start out with all of this. This was all kind of added in as people were sending me stuff. Like my buddy James sent me this, so like all the stuff that I have in the background were gifts of things that I had or collectibles that I put up. So for me, it was special that I was able to do something in that light, but I didn't start out with anything. And she's like, that's awesome, because I didn't either. Her first couple podcasts were done on a cell phone as well. So really all you need is ingenuity up here and something to go live with, and you could do a podcast, as long as you're pretty much able to FaceTime with somebody and record it. But I think a lot of my
Yeah.
issues were how to ask the right questions, how to be intuitive and listen, because that was always like the first couple critiques that I had when I'd ask my friends and family. I'm like, what did I do wrong? And they're like, when you ask a question, you have to let somebody answer it. You can't cut in on them. And I'm like, okay, because I'm like you, I like to talk, right? So that was it. But
Mm-hmm.
I never had any shortage of a conversation with somebody, right? I do
Mm-hmm.
mostly between a 45 and 50-minute podcast. And some of them have gone an hour 20, an hour 30 just by default. But I've never been short. I've never been like, oh, it's only 30 minutes. I have 15 left. What do I do? All my conversations, I've pretty much had to like kind of wind down to a finite ending. And then if there was more to talk about, say, hey, would you like to be a guest, in the future, because we just ran out of time. And so that's kind of where I've been very lucky, where I've never fell short of anything. But I just kind of wanted to
Mm-hmm.
get like your perspective. Like, what did you start with? Like, what equipment did you have? Do you remember?
What equipment? Okay. Well, I do. I started off first. I tried on an older laptop, and it just wasn't. It wasn't enough. I don't think it was enough memory for the program. That's how old it was.
Mm-hmm.
So then I went to, and I've tried on my cell phone, which you have to know the trick of how to block, your incoming messages. You have to make sure you go in your accessory, your app, and make sure you block, your calls
Yeah.
while you're filming. So you have to learn all of those things. And then you said the Apple product. What I've learned with what we're using tonight, the StreamYard, um, you Apple product and StreamYard is not necessarily like friends. So when you do use it, you want to use like one of the other search engines, like Google or what's the other one? Um, you
Safari or
want to
something
use
like
one of
that.
them to go
Yeah.
to your StreamYard. Yeah. Well, not Safari. Safari is a Apple product. You want to use something that's not the Apple product to like put it in your search,
Okay.
because I have, yeah, and because this for whatever reason, the program at Apple, they really don't get along that well.
Okay.
Yeah, so I always have to tell even people that come on the show, if you got an Apple phone, go to your, go to your Google, and then put your StreamYard location in your, do it, go
Right.
put your URL and come to the show
Right.
via Google.
Yeah.
Right. So I always have to tell, because I'm non-tech. So
Yeah.
but
Sure.
I had to learn, what's compatible, what's not.
Right.
So that's part of my growth of it, like basically learning what works and what doesn't work with the program
Right.
that we work with. Which
Sure.
StreamYard is something that I've always worked on. So I had to learn. Okay, StreamYard doesn't really get along with Apple products, so I gotta
Mm-hmm.
we gotta figure out how to go around it, because my cell phone is also an Apple product. So
Yeah, right. So yeah, it's crazy because like what I've learned in the short time of doing podcasting with the way that I had it set up initially was that I liked the idea of having a platform. Now, my friend who actually ended up being a distant cousin of mine was a podcaster and had been doing it for years, and he recommended StreamYard only because of the fact that it was free and it didn't cost anything, because a lot of the other ones like Audio Boom and the other sites were paying monthly through an app. So he said use StreamYard for now. Once you start gaining
Mhm.
money and people start donating toward the fund, which hasn't happened yet, but he's like, it will. He goes, then you could either upgrade or go to another one. So StreamYard's not the end all be all by any stretch of the imagination, but
Mhm.
for what I need it for the cost is nice. So that's why I do it. So at this point,
Yeah.
I'm very happy that it worked out the way that it did, because now I'm just able to do what I needed to do and use it for how I needed to use it. So that's why I
Mhm.
pitched StreamYard to begin with, because I didn't necessarily need to do that, right? There were a lot of other
Mhm.
platforms. It just seemed to be the easiest of use to go live with Facebook, because then I could download it and
Yeah.
upload it to YouTube. So those that use YouTube solely is awesome, but then the problem is you can't share it. Once it's the YouTube, the feed is in. So this was the best way to do it for me and my personal reason. So that's why I opted to go this route with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is the one, but like I said, this is the one I've used the most as well, and I like it. It's easy. It's an easy use. But like I said, it's just to
Mm-hmm.
really just know that when you are using it, if you do have a Google product, open up your search on. I mean, not Google. If you have an Apple product, open up your Google search and then go through
Sure.
it that way to short it out of that Apple product, because
Okay.
the two are not really, they kind
Right.
of don't get along. They're not interchangeable.
Sure.
And sometimes it would seem like you have a problem with your phone or with your iPad when you really don't. It's
Mm-hmm.
just they're not interchangeable. So I
Yeah.
did learn that. Um, so it is an easy. This one is the easy one to do, and you can just go live. Uh, you you
Mm-hmm.
can you can do that as well.
Sure.
And then once you talked about like Facebook, and you also got to know what your different platforms are, what their rules are as far as their community.
Correct.
I've learned that too, because I like music, but all of them
Yeah.
are not they're not too compatible with that,
Yeah. A lot of them do
because of the
not like music.
laws.
They will flag you for copyright.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so if you don't want to get a momentum, and then that's an issue.
That is very, very true. So now with your podcast being established and everything that you have, right? When you
Hmm.
started out and you made those mistakes and you learned from them and you fixed them, what, real
Hmm.
quick in the last few minutes that we have left, what would you tell somebody who wants to start a podcast or is thinking about doing it? What advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, know that actually when you're starting a podcast, even though you're starting with this great ideal, because it's like we had, to know that you are creating something that you're going to be giving, you're going to nurture it. It's not going to be instant, as one fun guy said. It's not going to be an instant deal. You're not going to have instant followers unless you already are known socially, but so it's something you're going to have to continually to work on. I've read a lot of publications. Basically they said really you're going to be working 2 years, and you could be pretty consistent those 2 years. You may not make a dime. I just want
Mm-hmm.
you to understand that, because right now podcasting is like the new journey to making money. And so, but all the information that I've read on it, and most podcasters before us, they say, look, 2 years, and even in that second year, you may
Mm-hmm.
only make $35. But then you may come around to that third or fourth year and start really skyrocketing. I had read one. He went all the way like to his millions. And he was a financial advisor. He's a financial advisor but and so just be aware of that. Because sometimes it'll look like, okay, what am I doing this for? Because again, like I said, you're balancing off this obligation with other obligations.
Sure.
So I would say, remember that. Remember why you started. And remember, it's not a quick payoff, because this is something that it requires consistency, and it's a gradual deal. It's nothing instant. I will say that.
Yeah. So that's probably the best advice you can give, right? It's a process like anything else, right? When you start entry level at a company, you're not the CEO, right? You have to work your way up to get to that point. So little promotions here and there, little raises here and there, then you get a bigger promotion and a bigger bump in pay, and then you get more responsibility, and then you become management, and then you work your way up. A lot of people think that they start a podcast and they're going to just go from a 0 to a million overnight. And then when they don't, they get frustrated and they're like, well, it's not worth my time. And I think that's the biggest thing, like you hit on, is time management, right? You don't want this to take away from your job or your family or your friendships or real relationships. But you do have to make time to do it, because by the time you do the podcast and you edit the video and you add sound and you make sure that it goes up, and you want it to be the best product you can put out, that also takes time. So doing a half an hour podcast with a half an hour editing now is an hour, plus the 25 or 30 minutes that it took you to make a post and create it, put it on social media to get traction to get to you, and then the post, right? Thanking somebody for being on your podcast and putting it out that, you're going to be on in another week or another 2 weeks, and then trying to find guests, right? Networking and saying, hey, do you want to be a guest on my podcast? Because you can join all these podcast groups in the world, but you can reach out to them. If they don't respond back to you, then that's a no-go, right? You networked the best you could and it didn't work out. So, a lot of work goes into it. And that's the biggest thing. Like when I started podcasting, I had those kind of pipe dreams, right? That I was going to go to the top quick, and that everybody that I knew wanted to be on my show, and that I didn't have to find anybody. And I learned that very quickly, that if you don't reach out to people, they're not going to come to you. So if you don't ask, you're not going to get an answer. And if you wait around for people to come to you, you're going to be waiting for a long time, because they're just not going to you. You have to establish rapport. You have to establish common ground. You have to establish conversation, because unless they know you from another situation, they're not just going to be a guest on your podcast. They want to know what it's about, what your traction's like, how what do we talk about? What are our subject matter? Because a lot of people don't have that. They just, come on blank, and they don't have a structure, and then they run out of things to talk about, and then they run out of time. And that's the biggest thing, because you have an hour slot and you're 35 minutes into it, and you ran out of subject matter, and you're picking and poking at things to try to get, it's not going to go very well for you. So that's the issue that we have. So, with the way that it is now, I think you hit every point very well. But I just wanted to get your background, just because I know that you have a really good show and it's well established, and I love being a guest on it. But both, actually, the Put It All on Red and the Taboo Chronicles, which are both phenomenal shows. I've been more on the Taboo Chronicles, but I just feel that somebody who's been in it a little bit longer than I have could just give a little bit more insight to those, because I do get asked a lot of questions. This is my first episode, what do I do? Or this is going to be my second one, what do I do? And I was like, you have to find what you're passionate about to talk about, because if you don't have anything to go on, then your show's going to run out. And how many people started, by the time they get to the 10th episode, they're like, well, that's it. I can't do anymore. I don't know what to talk about. I don't know who to have on. Where somebody who's ultra successful like you, that has hundreds of episodes, that you obviously find people to get on your show, and you do a very good job at that. And I just wanted to point that out to all my viewers, is that if you aren't following Roberta, definitely do that. I'll link up all her stuff in the bio, and this video will go to YouTube.
Follow me. I'm looking for people too.
That's it, right? I know. So
and you're always invited to be on my show as well.
I love that.
Fun Guy. And anyone else who wants to be on the show, anyone that has a story, because like I said, I have two different podcasts, and both of them, I mean, if it's a story of fighting against the grain and you winning,
Mhm.
it's a rocky story.
Yeah.
Hey, put it all on red is right there for you.
Yeah. We love that.
And if it's a story of, hey, Roberta, this is what is happening to me, and no one wants to hear it, but I need to be heard. There you go, Taboo Chronicles, right
That's it.
there. So I got both worlds for you.
There you
But
go.
yeah, I would love to hear from you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you, Roberta, for being a good guest. And like I said, guys, I'm the One Fun Guy podcast. This is Roberta. I'll link up all her stuff in the bio. This video will be on YouTube shortly. I'll post it up. I'm actually going to be going on to my other podcast now. So I will see you guys all on TikTok in a few minutes. Roberta, thank you again for being an amazing guest as always. And I will see you soon. Thank you
Good
so
night.
much. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.